Have you ever felt the sharp sting of betrayal? The kind that cuts so deep, it changes you forever? Imagine discovering that the two people you trusted the most, your wife and your own brother, have been lying to you, deceiving you in the worst way possible. What would you do? Would you fight for your marriage, or would you seek revenge? In this gripping tale, one man's life takes a dark turn when he uncovers the ultimate betrayal. But what happens next will shock you to your core. Stay tuned to find out how this chilling story of love, deception, and revenge unfolds. Don't miss a single moment. It's a wild ride you won't forget. Chapter 1. A past that seemed perfect. The sun was setting over the quiet suburbs of Seattle, casting a warm, golden glow over our home. I, Jason, had always believed that my life was a dream come true. I had a beautiful wife, Emily, and a promising career in architecture. We had met in college, and from the moment I saw her, I knew she was the one. Our love story was the kind people wrote books about: passionate, intense, and filled with dreams of a future together. Emily was everything I had ever wanted. Smart, funny, and incredibly supportive. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to work through them. I thought we were invincible. But lately, something had changed. Emily started coming home late from work, her phone always on silent, and she seemed distant, as if she was hiding something. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the feeling gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing day. I confided in my best friend Mark, who advised me to talk to Emily directly. But I hesitated, fearing that once I opened that door, there would be no going back. Chapter 2. The first seeds of doubt. As the days turned into weeks, the gnawing feeling in my gut only intensified. Emily's behavior became more erratic. She would leave for work earlier in the morning and return home well after dark, often claiming she had to work late. But something about her excuses felt hollow, like she was reciting lines from a script. One evening, while she was in the shower, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Normally, I would have ignored it, respecting her privacy. But this time, something compelled me to look. The message was from an unsaved number, but the words sent a chill down my spine. "Can't wait to see you tonight, same place?" My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Who was she meeting, and why was she being so secretive? I quickly put the phone back, trying to compose myself before she returned. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but a part of me was terrified of what I might discover. I decided to confide in Mark again, hoping he could offer some clarity. Over coffee, I told him everything. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each word. "You need to be careful, Jason," he warned. "If she's hiding something, you don't want to tip her off. Gather more evidence before you make any accusations." His words resonated with me, but the waiting was agony. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering on the brink of a devastating fall. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Deception. The following weeks were a blur of suspicion and dread. I found myself constantly on edge, my mind consumed by thoughts of Emily's secret life. I began to notice small things that I had previously overlooked: her evasive answers, the way she would quickly change the subject whenever I asked about her day, and the distant look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. One afternoon, while she was at work, I decided to take a more proactive approach. I logged into her email account, a move that felt both desperate and wrong. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages, searching for any clue that might reveal the truth. And then I found a series of emails between her and someone named Michael. My stomach dropped as I read through their exchanges. They were filled with inside jokes, flirtatious comments, and plans to meet up. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it all. Who was this Michael, and why was my wife communicating with him so intimately? I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed more information before I confronted her. I decided to follow her, to see where she was going and who she was meeting. It was a risky move, but I felt like I had no other choice. The next evening, I waited outside her office building, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. When she finally emerged, I followed her at a distance, careful to stay out of sight. She drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where she met with a man I had never seen before. They sat at a corner table, their heads close together as they talked and laughed. I watched from across the street, my heart aching with each passing moment. I wanted to storm in and demand answers, but I knew I had to be patient. As I watched them, a part of me still hoped that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew the truth. My wife was having an affair, and I had no idea what to do next. Chapter 4. The Shattering Revelation. The days that followed were a living nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and could barely function at work. The image of Emily and that man in the cafe haunted me, replaying over and over in my mind. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, consumed by a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness. I finally confronted Emily one evening after she returned home late yet again. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Who is he, Emily? Who have you been seeing?" My voice was raw with emotion, and I could feel my hands shaking as I waited for her response. At first, she looked shocked, her eyes wide with surprise. But then her expression shifted, and she let out a sigh, as if she had been expecting this moment. "Jason, it's not what you think," she began, her voice calm and measured. But I didn't want to hear her excuses. I wanted the truth. I demanded to know who Michael was, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. "Michael is your brother," she said quietly, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt the air leave my lungs. My mind reeled as I tried to process what she had said. My own brother, how could he do this to me? And how could Emily betray me in such a devastating way? I felt like my entire world was crumbling around me, and I was powerless to stop it. Emily tried to explain, saying that it had started as a friendship, but things had gotten out of hand. She claimed they had never meant to hurt me, but their words felt hollow and meaningless. I couldn't listen anymore. I felt sick to my stomach, and I needed to get out of there. I stormed out of the house, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. How could I ever trust either of them again? And how could I make them pay for what they had done? Chapter 5. The Abyss of Anger. The night was cold and unforgiving, much like the storm raging inside me. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become my life. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, oscillating between disbelief, fury, and a deep, gnawing pain that threatened to consume me. I couldn't believe that Emily, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, had been unfaithful not just with anyone, but with my own brother. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined, and I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. As I drove, images of the two of them together flashed through my mind, each one more vivid and painful than the last. I imagined their secret meetings, their whispered conversations, and the lies they had told to cover their tracks. The thought of it made me sick, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to steady myself. I found myself at Mark's place, though I couldn't remember how I got there. He took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. I told him everything, my voice breaking as I recounted the details of Emily's confession. Mark listened in stunned silence, his expression a mix of shock and sympathy. "Jason, I am so sorry," he said finally, his voice quiet and sincere. "I can't even imagine what you are going through right now." He offered me a drink and I accepted, grateful for the momentary distraction. As we sat in silence, I felt a surge of anger building inside me. I wanted revenge. I wanted to make them both pay for the pain they had caused me. But I also felt a deep sense of loss, a grief for the life I had lost and the future I had imagined. Mark suggested we come up with a plan, something to help me regain control of the situation. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said, "but we can start by gathering more information, finding out how long this has been going on and what their endgame is." I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief at the prospect of taking action. But deep down, I knew that no amount of revenge could undo the damage that had been done. I was at the edge of an abyss, and I wasn't sure if I would ever find my way back. Chapter 6. The Web of Retribution. The days turned into a blur of anger and plotting. Mark and I spent countless hours devising a plan to expose Emily and Michael, to make them feel the same pain they had inflicted on me. We started by digging deeper into their lives, uncovering secrets they had tried to keep hidden. I accessed Emily's social media accounts, finding messages and photos that confirmed their betrayal. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but it also fueled my determination. I saved everything, creating a digital trail of evidence that would be impossible for them to deny. Meanwhile, Mark reached out to some of his contacts, people who could help us gather more information. We discovered that Emily and Michael had been meeting for months, their affair a well-kept secret from both of our families and friends. The thought of them laughing behind my back, thinking they had gotten away with it, filled me with a cold, calculating rage. We decided to play the long game, to bide our time and gather as much evidence as possible. I created fake social media profiles, using them to befriend Emily and Michael, slowly gaining their trust. It was a risky move, but I was determined to catch them in the act. As the weeks passed, I became consumed by my quest for revenge. I barely slept, my mind constantly racing with thoughts of their betrayal and the plan we were orchestrating. I felt like I was losing myself, but I couldn't stop. The need for retribution was too strong. One evening, Mark and I met to discuss our next move. "We need to be careful," he warned. "If they catch on, they might try to turn the tables on us." I nodded, knowing he was right, but the thought of them getting away with it was unbearable. We decided to set a trap, to create a situation where they would be forced to reveal themselves. It was a dangerous game, but I was ready to take the risk. I just wanted it to be over, to make them pay for what they had done. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The air was thick with tension as Mark and I put our plan into motion. We had spent weeks laying the groundwork, and now it was time to set the trap. I had been cultivating a fake persona online, slowly gaining the trust of both Emily and Michael. They had no idea that the person they were confiding in was, in fact, me. The plan was simple yet risky. I would arrange a meeting with my new friend, who was supposedly a mutual acquaintance of Emily and Michael, at a local bar. The idea was to make them believe that this person had information about their affair and was willing to share it for a price. As the day of the meeting approached, my heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and dread. I knew that if our plan worked, it would mean the end of Emily and Michael's secret relationship. But I also knew that it could backfire, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. The night of the meeting, I arrived at the bar early, taking a seat in a dimly lit corner where I could observe without being seen. Mark was stationed outside, ready to step in if things went awry. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I watched Emily and Michael enter the bar, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They scanned the room, looking for their contact, unaware that they were walking into a carefully orchestrated setup. I watched as they ordered drinks and settled into a booth, their heads close together as they whispered and waited. Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, my heart racing with each passing moment. Finally, I sent a message from my fake account, instructing them to meet me outside. I watched as they exchanged a nervous glance before making their way to the door. As they stepped outside, Mark and I moved in, cornering them in the alley behind the bar. The look of shock on their faces was almost worth the weeks of planning and the sleepless nights. "What is this?" Emily stammered, her eyes wide with fear. I stepped forward, my voice cold and steady. "This is the end of your little game," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "I know everything, and I am here to make sure you both pay for what you've done." Chapter 8. The Unraveling. The night air was sharp and cold, cutting through the tension that hung thick in the alley. Emily and Michael stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. I could see the panic in their eyes as they realized they had been caught, and a small part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. "How could you do this, Emily?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "And you, Michael, me own brother, how could you betray me like this?" My words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and pain. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at Michael as if hoping he would have an explanation, but he just stood there, his head bowed in shame. "We never meant for it to happen," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just happened." Her words were like salt in an open wound, and I felt a surge of rage. "You expect me to believe that?" I spat, taking a step closer. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Michael finally spoke up, his voice quiet and contrite. "Jason, I am sorry. I know T here is nothing I can say to make this right, but I never wanted to hurt you." His apology sounded hollow, and I could feel my anger boiling over. I wanted to lash out, to make them feel the same pain they had caused me. But as I stood there, looking at the two people I had once loved and trusted, I felt a deep sense of loss. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with a profound sadness, a grief for the life I had lost. In that moment, I realized that no amount of revenge could undo what had been done. I could expose them, ruin their lives, but it wouldn't bring back the trust we had once shared. I felt a sudden urge to walk away, to leave them there and try to find some semblance of peace. But before I could make a decision, Mark stepped in, his voice firm and controlled. "We have evidence," he said, holding up a folder filled with printouts of their messages and photos. "Enough to ruin both of you, but we're willing to make a deal." Chapter 9. The Bitter Aftermath. The weight of the situation settled over us like a heavy fog as Mark laid out our terms. We had gathered enough evidence to expose Emily and Michael, to ruin their reputations and shatter their lives as they had done mine. But as I stood there, listening to Mark speak, I felt a growing sense of unease. The anger that had fueled me for so long was beginning to wane, replaced by a deep, aching emptiness. I had imagined this moment countless times, picturing their faces as they realized their lives were crumbling around them. But now that it was happening, I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a hollow sense of loss. Emily and Michael listened in silence, their expressions a mix of fear and resignation. They knew they had no choice but to accept our terms, a public confession and a promise to leave town, never to return. It was a small consolation, but it was all I had left. As they agreed to our demands, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching the scene unfold from a distance. I had spent so long focused on revenge that I hadn't allowed myself to grieve, to process the pain of their betrayal. Now, as the adrenaline faded, I was left with nothing but the raw, unfiltered truth of what had happened. Mark and I watched as they walked away, their heads bowed in defeat. I knew I should feel triumphant, but instead I felt a profound sense of sadness. I had lost more than just my marriage, and my trust in my brother had lost a part of myself. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of daily life, but everything felt muted, as if I were living in a haze. I tried to focus on work, on rebuilding my life, but the pain was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I found myself thinking about Emily and Michael, wondering how they were coping with the fallout of their actions. I knew I should hate them, but the truth was, I just felt numb. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that was harder to bear than any rage. Chapter 10. A New Dawn. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to find my way back to myself. The pain of Emily and Michael's betrayal was still there, a constant presence in the back of my mind, but it had lost its sharp edge. I started to realize that holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me, and I needed to find a way to move forward. I sought out therapy, something I had never considered before. It was a difficult process, but it helped me to confront my feelings and begin to heal. I learned to forgive not for their sake, but for my own. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about condoning what they had done, but about releasing the hold they had on my life. I also reconnected with old friends, people who had stood by me during the darkest times. Their support and understanding were invaluable, and I found solace in their company. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, focusing on the things that truly mattered: my career, my passions, and the people who cared about me. I took up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. I traveled, exploring new places and meeting new people. Each experience helped to broaden my perspective and reminded me that there was a world beyond the pain of my past. As I began to heal, I also started to see the situation with Emily and Michael in a new light. I realized that their actions were a reflection of their own insecurities and flaws, not a judgment on my worth. It was a painful lesson, but an important one. I even found myself feeling grateful for the experience, in a strange way. It had taught me the value of honesty, of trust, and of true friendship. I had learned to be more discerning in my relationships, to value quality over quantity. Chapter 11. Reflections and Moving Forward. As I sit here now, looking back on the tumultuous journey I've been through, I can't help but feel a sense of bittersweet closure. The pain of Emily and Michael's betrayal will always be a part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I've come to understand that life is a series of challenges and lessons, and this was one of the most profound. I've learned that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to one's strength. Forgiving Emily and Michael didn't mean I forgot what they did. It meant I chose to let go of the anger and pain that had been holding me back. It was a difficult process, but it was necessary for my own healing. I've also learned the importance of self-reflection and growth. The experience forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities and insecurities, to understand what I truly wanted and needed in life. It was a painful awakening, but it ultimately led me to a place of greater self-awareness and acceptance. In the end, I realized that I deserved better than what Emily and Michael had offered. I deserved honesty, loyalty, and real love, not the shallow imitation they had given me. I took the time to rediscover myself, to figure out what truly made me happy and fulfilled. Now, I find myself in a place of peace and contentment. I've rebuilt my life, focusing on the things that truly matter: my career, my passions, and the people who genuinely care about me. I've also opened myself up to new relationships, ones based on trust and mutual respect. As I move forward, I carry the lessons of the past with me, but I don't let them weigh me down. I choose to focus on the present and the future, on the possibilities that lie ahead. I've learned that life is unpredictable, and while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. To anyone who has experienced betrayal or heartbreak, I want to say this: You are not alone. The pain is real, but it is not the end. There is hope, and there is a way through. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. If you've made it this far in the story, thank you for listening. I hope it has given you something to think about, something to reflect on in your own life. If you have thoughts or experiences to share, I encourage you to leave a comment. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing for more stories like this one. Together, we can navigate the complexities of life and find our own paths to healing and happiness.